I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other's business. Secrets didn't last, and one mistake could quickly become gossip at every dinner table. My mischief often reached my parents before I even got home, thanks to the town's rumor mill. As time went on, our town became a sought-after suburb. Its proximity to the city made it desirable, causing house prices to skyrocket. Locals struggled to afford homes, creating a divide between longtime residents and newcomers looking for a temporary stepping stone. I married my first love, Claire, at 21. We had been together since our teens, and I thought our love would last forever. But Claire had other plans. Our town, with its 12,000 residents, was the kind of place where news traveled fast, and secrets were impossible to keep. Claire and I met in a large, cold school built for kids from nearby villages. The overcrowded classes and indifferent teachers weren't ideal for a troublemaker like me. I had no friends, my family didn't get me, and I felt utterly alone. Until I met Claire. Claire was beautiful, naturally fit, and effortlessly popular. She was friendly and unaware of her effect on others. I admired her from a distance, convinced she was out of my league. One day she approached me and asked, "Why haven't you asked me out yet?" From then on, we were inseparable. I wasn't much to look at back then, tall, moody, and always getting into trouble. Despite this, Claire and I were a couple by age 15. Her parents disapproved, wondering why their lovely daughter would choose a troublemaker. My parents, on the other hand, were thrilled, hoping she'd be a positive influence on me. Being the youngest in my family with much older siblings added to my introversion. Meanwhile, Claire was an only child, adored by her parents, which later caused issues in our marriage. Still, we believed our love would last. Despite her father's attempts to break us apart, Claire and I stayed together. She encouraged me to change my attitude and focus on my education. While neither of us aimed for college, she seemed destined to work for her father, who owned several furniture stores. By 21, she was already managing one. I left school at 16 and started an apprenticeship as an auto mechanic. I excelled, naturally talented in diagnostics. When I finally became a full-fledged mechanic, I proposed to Claire. My parents were thrilled. Her father was furious. He nearly threw me out when I asked for his blessing. Eventually, Claire's mother, Gwen, calmed him down, and we married a few months later. It took years for us to become fully physical engaged, and when we did, it was planned. At 18, I saved enough for a hotel room far from home, where we spent a romantic night. We shared a passionate experience, laughing and enjoying each moment. After that, we took every chance to express our love, though nothing quite matched that first night. In the early years of our marriage, I was happier than Claire. I'd become a foreman at work, and Claire's father kept raising her salary to make me feel inferior. I handled most household expenses while Claire used her disposable income for luxury items. Her father even gifted her a brand new E-Type convertible, likely to humiliate me. Despite this, Claire was generous, buying me gifts like a Rolex and suits. I renovated our cottage into a spacious home. But after a vacation in Spain, which Claire paid for, things changed. We met another couple our age, and I soon grew tired of their bragging. When I told Claire, she snapped, accusing me of lacking ambition. I was shocked. I thought we were building a life together, maybe even starting a family one day. Clearly, I was wrong. After that trip, Claire became increasingly dissatisfied with our life. She had grown up getting everything she wanted instantly, so saving for things was foreign to her. Her father didn't help, continuing to buy her whatever she desired. I had already refused his offer to buy us a house in an upscale area, insisting we get one we could afford on my income alone. Claire's higher salary and her father's jabs about it caused tension. I turned to martial arts, spending most nights training, which created more distance. Claire began going out with her single friends during the week, while we reserved weekends for dinner and dancing. Despite our separate social lives, home life seemed okay. We laughed, talked, and maintained a physical relationship. I never suspected our marriage was in real trouble, until the day that changed everything. One morning, I stopped by the house to pick up a customer's car and check for mail. I noticed the answering machine's light blinking and casually hit play. My wife's voice came through, speaking to a man I didn't recognize. They flirted, talked about their time together, and mocked me. My heart sank. I replayed the message, hoping it was a joke. It wasn't. Claire was having an affair. I called work, canceled my plans, and waited at home for her. When she walked in, I confronted her. She tried to play dumb, but I hit play on the recording. Her shoulders slumped. "Oh, hell," she muttered, then stormed out, leaving me stunned and angry. I never heard from Claire again. I tried to reach her, but her father blocked my attempts. He told me, "You're no longer part of my daughter's life. Stay away from my family." Eventually, I was served with a restraining order. They claimed they feared for their safety. It was absurd. I had no intention of injuring anyone. I just wanted to understand why she left. I took 2 weeks off work, spending most of that time at home, drinking and trying to make sense of it all. Toward the end of my isolation, the doorbell rang. Hoping it was Claire, I opened the door to find Gwen. "Oh my God, John, look at you!" she gasped. "What do you want? And where's my wife?" I snapped. Gwen sat down, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, John. She's made it clear she wants a divorce. She's on holiday somewhere." "It's not your fault," I said, sitting beside her. "I just don't get it." "Maybe if I'd been tougher on her growing up, she'd have appreciated what she had with you," Gwen sighed. "Was it because I didn't give her everything?" I asked, frustration boiling over. "She's just foolish," Gwen replied, surprising me. I managed a weak laugh. "No need to swear," I teased. "Oh, shut up," she chuckled. "Now go shower while I clean up this mess." I obeyed, standing under the hot water until it ran cold. An hour later, I returned to the kitchen, slightly more sober, but nursing a throbbing headache. Gwen handed me a mug of coffee. "Have you eaten?" she asked. "I don't think so," I admitted. "Idiot," she snapped. "Sit down. I'll make you something." I sat, sipping the coffee. Soon I felt nauseous and rushed to the bathroom. When I returned, Gwen had made chicken soup. "Think you can keep that down?" she asked. "I'll try," I replied. As she left, she told me to visit her the next day for a proper meal. The following day, I pulled into my in-laws' driveway. Gwen opened the door before I could knock, ushering me inside. She wore a tighter, more revealing outfit than usual, and seemed nervous, fidgeting with her hair. "I listened to the message yesterday," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry, John. I don't understand how she could do this to you." Embarrassed, I looked away. "I thought she was happy." "So did I," Gwen replied with regret. Her language surprised me, something I wasn't used to from her. "Oops, sorry. I know I shouldn't swear, but she makes me so mad," Gwen added, blushing. We both laughed, easing the tension. I glanced at her exposed thighs, noticing how much she resembled an older version of Claire. She caught me looking. "Do you like what you see, John? These are Claire's clothes. I thought you'd like seeing them again." "Gwen?" I replied, shocked by this new side of her. With a trembling voice, she continued, "Please don't turn me down. I know I'm not as young as my daughter, but I've wanted you since we first met. Now that she's gone, I was wondering—" "Oh my God, Gwen! I had no idea. I've never felt that way about you." Her face showed disappointment, but she quickly smiled. "Looks like you do now," she chuckled, nodding toward my groin. Mortified, I grabbed a magazine to cover myself. Gaining confidence, she said softly, "We can forget this and have lunch or go upstairs, get some revenge, and eat later." Taking my silence as agreement, she stood, took my hand, and kissed me. It had been over a month since I'd had sex, and my body responded naturally. She led me to the master bedroom, prepared with flickering candles, satin sheets, and warmth. That afternoon, I took my revenge 3 times. "You know you're only the second woman I've been with, right?" I said, sitting on the bed, pulling my knees to my chest. "Really? I thought you'd been with others before Claire," Gwen replied, joining me. "We were both maids," I said, staring at Claire's photo on the bedside table. "I can't believe she thinks she can do better," Gwen muttered. "She's lucky she's not married to her father. He's useless at it," she laughed, playfully punching my shoulder. We showered together, then dressed. "I'm starving," I said, eyeing the sandwiches she'd made. "You'll have to get takeout." "Frank can have this food. You've had his wife all afternoon, so he might as well have your lunch," Gwen joked, pushing me out the door with one last kiss. Our affair continued for months as I processed my failed marriage. We met whenever possible, mostly at her house, in her marital bed. Following my father's advice, I hired his lawyer friend for the divorce. Claire was suing for alimony and half our assets. My lawyer discovered that her father's business had paid her far less than I thought, and she had no savings, even her car was leased. She demanded we sell the house and split the proceeds 50-50ths, despite me handling all the renovations and expenses. My lawyer fought to lower the settlement. We countersued on grounds of infidelity, but her lawyer claimed I had driven her to it through mental cruelty. Despite the judge's skepticism, I had to sell the house and pay her legal fees, though I avoided alimony. In the end, I was left with only a few £1,000s and nowhere to live. A few months later, I moved to the city, renting a small 2-bedroom flat. My affair with Gwen continued. She'd visit me, using shopping as an excuse to spend afternoons and evenings in bed. I hadn't seen or heard from Claire since the divorce. She moved to the city, buying a penthouse with her settlement and her father's help. Gwen told me that Claire had cut ties with her. They'd had arguments, with Claire siding with her father while Gwen defended me. Eventually, Claire told her mother to stay out of her business. The tension in Claire's parents' house became unbearable when she visited, so she stopped going. Her father began visiting her at her flat instead. Gwen, fed up with arguing about Claire, decided to ignore any news her husband shared about her. Gwen and I had an unspoken agreement to never talk about my ex-wife, which suited me perfectly. I was filled with resentment toward Claire. The lies she told during our divorce, betraying my love, and her indifference to our life together pushed me to stop caring. What hurt most was the contemptuous look she gave me as we left the courthouse. 10 years meant nothing to her. Later, I found out through a friend that, months before our separation, Claire had been frequenting a club known for married women seeking casual flings. She had been seen with various men, but toward the end of our marriage, she was often with an older, flashy man with a shady reputation. This deepened my sense of betrayal and anger, leaving me wondering what she was looking for that I couldn't provide. The following summer, I reluctantly joined my coworkers for a pub crawl to celebrate a colleague's 21st birthday. They planned to end the night at a club, but I opted out, saying I didn't need to chat up anyone since I had someone. Surprisingly, I enjoyed the night. As my coworkers headed to the club, I left, ignoring their jokes about being an old man. On my way to grab a kebab, a car door suddenly swung open, hitting my hip. "Oops, sorry, mate," I said. "Watch where you're going, idiot," the driver snapped, stepping out to confront me. "My fault, no problem," I replied, trying to avoid trouble. "Leave him alone, Carl. He's always been a fool," said a familiar voice. It was Claire, sitting in a Bentley. "You know this guy?" the man Carl demanded. "He's my ex-husband," Claire replied, disgust clear in her tone. "Is he now? Time for him to learn a lesson," Carl sneered, shoving me. My training kicked in, and I pushed him back against the car, hearing a grunt as he slumped down. "So much for teaching me a lesson," I muttered, walking away. "Prick!" Claire screamed, rushing to Carl's side. I walked off, cursing under my breath. I flagged a taxi and went home, collapsing on my bed, still fully dressed. The next morning, loud sound woke me. Groggy, I opened the door to find police. "John Grant?" a plainclothes officer asked. I nodded. "You're under arrest for the liquidation of Carl Simpson. You do not have to say anything, but anything you do say may be used in evidence against you." "Liquidation?" I was stunned. What? I stammered. The officers cuffed me and took me to the station where I was formally charged. In the cell, the events of the night replayed in my mind. Carl, Claire's companion. What happened? I didn't touch him, so how could he be dead? The police pressured me to confess, but I demanded a lawyer. Since I couldn't afford one, I was assigned a legal aid solicitor. He refused to let me be questioned until he had the details. An hour later, he returned, looking grim. Carl had hit his head on the car door during our altercation, causing a brain bleed that eliminated him before help arrived. "I only pushed him," I protested. "That's not what the police heard," he replied. "There's a witness saying you started it." "A witness? Who?" I stammered. "His companion, the woman with him. She says you attacked without provocation." He stared at me. "Is she lying?" "Of course she's lying," I yelled. "She's my ex-wife. She lies about me all the time." "Oh, dear," he muttered. I realized then she was behind this mess. Overwhelmed, I vomited on the cell floor. Reality hit harder when I received a letter from Gwen while awaiting trial. She said she couldn't forgive her husband or daughter and planned to divorce him. She went to the police to counter Claire's claims that I was violent, but they dismissed her statements. She felt ashamed, not of me, but of her own family. She apologized for not visiting, saying she couldn't bear to see me locked up. That letter broke my heart. During the trial, Claire lied, claiming she had always been afraid of my violent nature, which was why she left. She left out her affairs, painting her boyfriend as calm and innocent. My lawyer tried to defend me, but the jury believed her. I was found guilty of manslaughter. The judge, completely swayed by her testimony, compared my martial arts skills to using a deadly weapon and sentenced me to 20 to 30 years with a minimum of 20. My family wept. Claire glared at me with hatred as I was led away. That moment changed me. I had loved her, but now all I felt was bitterness and resentment. When I first entered the high-security prison, I was terrified. It was my first time behind bars, and I feared what might happen. On my first day, I met my cellmate, Archie Squires. He was a skilled forger serving 8 years for selling a fake artwork. Despite his small, delicate build, Archie was kind and soon became my best friend. One day, I returned to our cell to find a bully threatening Archie for cigarettes. I stepped in, making it clear that behavior wouldn't be tolerated. A swift kick to the groin ended it. From then on, Archie had my back, showing me how to navigate prison life. Prison was never quiet. Nights were filled with coughing, crying, and the guards jangling keys. Insomnia plagued me for weeks. I'd lie awake, replaying how my life had crumbled. Archie stayed up with me, trying to distract me. I shared my story, and he believed me, something no one else had done. In return, he told me his own. Archie, an orphan, was named after the man who found him as a baby. He spent his childhood in various orphanages, shuffled around during the war. Not knowing his birthday, he chose June 21st, the longest day, so it would last. With his help, I finally started sleeping. He also warned me about a planned attack from Carl Simpson's associates, a pill gang. Claire's connection to Carl, whether love or greed, fueled their hatred toward me. Archie advised, "When the attack comes, defend yourself. It's you or them." A few weeks into my sentence, 3 men cornered me after I left the showers. 2 were as tall as my 6'4" frame, while the third was shorter and armed with a shiv. The guards were nowhere in sight. Adrenaline kicked in. They circled me, taunting about how they'd carve me up. I had 2 advantages. They didn't know my fighting skills, and I was fighting for my life. Archie's words echoed. "It's you or them." I acted fast. A kick to the right dislocated one man's knee. A roundhouse to the left broke the second guy's nose. The third, holding the shiv, was wary. I delivered a spinning kick to his head, knocking him to his knees. I could have walked away, but I didn't. Grabbing his neck, I snapped it in anger and despair. He went limp. I glared at the others. "Tell whoever sent you to come for me themselves, if they want to finish this," I growled, walking back to my cell. In prison, snitching is the worst crime. So when the guards found the attackers, they claimed they had slipped on the soap. Rumors spread, and Archie, who knew the truth, never spoke of it. The incident earned me both fear and respect from inmates. An investigation followed, but the attackers stuck to their story, and the case was closed. Inside the prison, however, the power dynamics shifted. The real boss was Billy McVee, a ruthless gangster with control over the underground operations. Billy McVee, head of a notorious gang, had been nearly untouchable until he was finally convicted of several liquidations and sentenced to life with no chance of parole for 30 years. He was feared and respected by all. I nodded, understanding the gravity. "What if I just want to serve my time quietly?" I asked. McVee smirked. "Not an option, John. If you refuse, your family will suffer. I know where they live. You can defend yourself, but you have to sleep sometime. Got it?" His threat was clear. Refusal meant my family would be at risk. I felt anger toward McVee, Claire, and myself. I had already eliminated 2 men. I wasn't innocent anymore. I had no reason to refuse. I was stuck for 20 years. Why not make the best of it? I shook his hand. "I understand, Mr. McVee. You've got a new employee." "Good. Now go back to your cell. Your skills won't be needed often," he said with a chilling gaze. He was right. Stories of my fight were exaggerated into legend. The 2 survivors were transferred, leaving no one to dispute the rumors. On McVee's suggestion, I started training in the yard to keep up my image as a eliminating machine. After Lethal Weapon came out, inmates nicknamed me Riggs. I learned that my attackers were linked to Carl Simpson's pill gang. Once they found out I worked for Billy, they left me alone. Working for McVee had perks. Guards avoided me, inmates kept their distance, and I got better food. I even had a steady supply of soft toilet paper, a luxury. Like other long-term inmates, I faced the problem of no sex. Archie teased me, calling me a frustrated old woman. Billy, however, had a solution. The prison governor's secretary, Christine, was sex-starved and on Billy's payroll. She indulged her fantasies with select inmates. Once a month, I would be summoned to the governor's office, finding Christine waiting for me. Inmates came and went, and eventually, Archie's time was up. We promised to keep in touch. He had been my rock, so when he left, I felt an immense void. True to his word, Archie wrote to me weekly and called once a month. I was later given a single cell, but the loneliness at night was the hardest part. I missed Archie more than I could say. Being in prison took a toll on my family. My father died of a heart attack 2 years into my sentence, and my mother passed less than a year later, dying of a broken heart, as my sister said. My nieces and nephew distanced themselves, blaming me for their grandparents' end of lives. By the time I was released on parole 20 years later, one sister had died, and the other had stopped contacting me. I was now in my late 40s, with no family or place to call home. That's when Archie came through. He met me at the prison gates and took me to a luxurious hotel, where two stunning escorts waited. They were only the fourth and fifth women I'd ever slept with, and they drained every ounce of pent-up energy over the next 2 days. When the women left, I asked Archie, "How do you afford all this? I thought you went straight." "Not exactly," he laughed. "I took your advice, I started painting seriously, and people wanted to buy my work." "That's great, but how can you afford this?" I gestured around. Archie laughed. "You're clueless," he giggled. Just then, the maitre d' approached. "Is everything satisfactory, Mr. Squires?" Archie tipped him generously. Then a young girl shyly asked for his autograph. Archie sketched her face on a napkin, signed it, and wished her well. The girl was thrilled. In the lounge, I said, "I feel like I'm missing something." "Oh, you think so?" Archie grinned. "Let me explain," he said. He began telling me how he used his artistic talent for legal portraiture after his release. Starting small, he sold paintings at a market stall. One of his photos caught the eye of an art critic's daughter, leading to a review that catapulted him to fame. Now, his works were in high demand. "How rich are you?" I asked. Archie laughed, pouring more brandy. "My last painting sold for $350,000. The next morning, I woke up feeling awful. My head throbbed, and I barely made it to the bathroom before getting sick. When I stumbled back to my room, Archie was already up, dressed in jeans and a white t-shirt looking like an older James Dean. The only hint of last night's drinking was his aviator sunglasses. "Morning, how are you feeling?" he greeted cheerfully. "How do you look so normal?" I grumbled, collapsing onto the bed. "Practice," he laughed. "Now get showered. We've got things to do." He tossed me a towel and headed to breakfast. Eventually, I made it downstairs. The concierge informed me, "Mr. Squires is waiting outside." I found Archie in his BMW convertible, blasting rock music. I got in and immediately turned it off, which made him chuckle. "Lightweight," he teased as we drove off. We went shopping, where he insisted on buying me a new wardrobe from expensive stores. When I protested, he snapped, "I owe you everything. Now shut up and enjoy it." Trying to hide my emotions, I went along. Later, we stopped at an old country pub for lunch. As we relaxed, Archie said, "We need to talk about your future." "What future?" I replied bitterly. "I'm nearly 50, a convicted eliminator with no skills or place to go." "Exactly," he replied. "You could work for the McVies in London, but you're better than that. I need a personal assistant. Work with me." "And how do I do that? I can't leave the country while on parole, and Billy's invitation felt more like an order," I countered. "All taken care of," he said smoothly, pulling out an old, well-used passport and tossing it on the table. I picked up the small red passport, stunned. Inside was a photo that looked just like me, only with shorter hair and a goatee. "How did you get this?" I asked. "Let's just say I like to keep my skills sharp," Archie laughed. "Did you notice the name?" I glanced closer. "Very funny," I said, noticing his grin. Archie got up. "I need to take a leak." I sat there, staring at the passport. I knew it wasn't legal, but it looked real. It might just work as my ticket out. "Well?" Archie's voice brought me back to reality. "Ready to see the world, John Riggs?" I looked at the forged passport, weighing my options. Finally, I made my choice. "Screw it, let's do it." Archie jumped up and hugged me, drawing a look from the amused bartender. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Weeks later, we were at Archie's villa in Majorca, a stunning 4-bedroom property with a large pool. Life was good. I tanned, grew a goatee, and got a haircut to match the passport photo. I exercised daily, swimming laps each morning and running in the hills. I was in the best shape of my life. Archie wasn't always around. He traveled frequently for work, leaving me alone. I was still hesitant to use the passport. Archie kept his villa private, with only a few locals knowing he lived there, winning them over with his generosity and fluent Spanish. When Archie was home, he usually brought a beautiful woman with him, his latest model. The villa often echoed with the sounds of their nightly activities, which he made sure I heard. During the day, the women lounged by the pool, completely at ease, much to my frustration. I knew Archie enjoyed teasing me. One morning, I went to the pool and saw a stunning blonde climbing out. I was used to this by now, but I recognized her. She was a famous pop star. She smiled, grabbed her towel, and walked past with a cheerful, "Good morning." I stared as she strolled away, her figure glistening in the sun. "Close your mouth, you're drooling," Archie quipped from behind his newspaper. "Isn't that—" I stammered. "Probably," he replied, grinning. "But she's undressed," I blurted out. "Of course. We don't want tan lines when she models," he said casually, hiding his laughter behind the paper. "She does look hot, though," he added, just before I grabbed him and tossed him, fully clothed, into the pool. The villa was maintained by Maria and her husband, Jose Alberto, locals in their 60s. Maria cleaned and cooked, acting as our mother hen, while Jose took care of the garden and pool. A lovely couple. When alone, I often swam unclothed in the mornings, easier than drying swim trunks. Sometimes I even slept outside, enjoying the peace and quiet, a stark contrast to prison life. One hot day, I stepped out of the pool and saw Maria grinning from the patio doors. She laughed as I quickly covered up. With a smile, she teased, "Ah, Senor Juan, if I weren't such a good Catholic girl." "Carumba," I joked back. "And if I didn't like your husband so much." She giggled. "Maybe you need some attention, Senor Juan. Time you find someone." She was right. It had been nearly 2 months since my last fling. For someone nearing 50, I was inexperienced. My ex-wife, her mother, Christine, and the 2 escorts Archie arranged were all I'd known. I had no clue how to approach women. One evening, I admitted this to Archie by the pool. "You need a job," he declared. "I know just the place." He drove us to a restaurant we frequented, refusing to explain. Instead of entering the dining area, he went to the adjoining pub, poured us both a brandy, and said, "You need to work here." I looked around. The place was packed, mostly with women. "Sounds fun," I laughed, catching the eye of a striking woman who winked at me. "But why would they hire me? I've never worked behind a bar." Archie called out, "Giorgio, got a second?" The owner came over, warmly shaking Archie's hand. "Giorgio, this is my friend John. He'd like to work here," Archie said. "Of course. Any friend of Archie's is a friend of mine," Giorgio replied. "How?" I started. "Idiot! I own this place." Archie laughed, gesturing to the photos of famous people with him and Giorgio on the walls. "Is there anything you don't own?" I chuckled. "When do I start?" Working at the bar was a great idea. The place was full of stunning women all summer. Porta Andra attracted millionaires who docked their yachts there, and the bar was their go-to spot. One evening, I nervously suggested to a group of women, "Why don't you all come to the villa? There's plenty of room, and we can sort out breakfast." After teasing me, they agreed. In the taxi to the villa, I was surprisingly nervous. It wasn't about handling all 4 women. I was already captivated by Josie and hoped to separate her from the group. Thankfully, it was easy. As soon as the 3 younger women saw the pool lit up, they jumped in, laughing and splashing. Josie and I stood by, watching. Then, she noticed my discomfort as I adjusted my pants. "Sorry," I muttered, blushing. "Not at all," she laughed. "I'd be disappointed if it hadn't happened." She winked. Nervously, I kissed her. The taste of wine on her lips nearly made my knees buckle. When she pulled away, she whispered, "It's not going to happen tonight. Not on our first date." She swayed her hips and walked inside. Relieved but hopeful, I grinned. "So this is our first date, then?" "I hope so, John," she replied, smiling seductively. The 3 younger women continued their pool antics. They tried to coax us into joining, but Josie refused. "No way am I letting him compare my body to yours," she laughed, keeping me close. "I don't want them tempting my new man before I've had my chance." Eventually, they tired out and went inside, leaving Josie and me alone. If I hadn't been so captivated, I might have chased after them, but my focus was solely on her. We talked for hours. Josie shared her story of marrying a guitarist and her dreams of a family, which fell apart after he was unfaithful. The experience left lasting scars. I shared my story, my failed marriage and wrongful imprisonment. I left out some details, like the self-defense eliminating and working for a notorious criminal. Some things are better unsaid. I also mentioned Archie and his success as an artist. She was impressed, but admitted, "I've never heard of Archie as an artist, just as the bar owner." I laughed, picturing his reaction. We eventually dozed off, wrapped in towels against the morning chill. When I woke up stiff on the sunbed, I wondered if it had all been a dream. A glance at the scattered clothes around the pool reassured me it wasn't. I followed the laughter to the kitchen and found Josie and Maria cooking breakfast, chatting like old friends. Josie wore one of my t-shirts and gave me a warm smile as she came over for a hug and quick kiss. "Morning wood, too," she teased, eyeing my obvious arousal. Maria couldn't help but laugh. Maybe a cold shower is in order, Maria chuckled. Go on then, Josie said, nudging me toward the bedrooms. Breakfast will be ready in 10 minutes. Over the next few weeks, Josie and I spent all our time together. The younger girls enjoyed the pool and sun deck whenever they were in port, and even Jose Alberto, the gardener, couldn't help but keep the grounds perfectly maintained, despite Maria's scolding. Josie, though, kept her bikini on, a delightful but frustrating choice for me. Archie painted the girls, capturing their essence while still leaving much to the imagination. Josie refused to pose unclothed, so he painted just her face, perfectly capturing her warmth and spirit. Her eyes in the painting seemed to follow me everywhere, hinting at untold secrets. Despite our connection, Josie held off on closeness during those early weeks. She made it clear, saying, I'm not the type for quick flings or one-night stands. I need to know you better. I respected her wishes, falling for her more as I waited. I stopped pursuing other women, ignoring the advances of those in the bar. I've always been a one-woman man, and by then, I was smitten with Josie. Ironically, it was she who made the first move. One evening, she walked into the bar alone, carrying a small overnight bag. I rushed to hug her, feeling like we'd been apart for months, though it had only been 3 weeks. After we kissed, she whispered with a playful smile, I'm here for a week, all alone. I hope our bed has clean sheets. Of course, madam, I replied, grinning. Her words hit me, and I called over my shoulder, Giorgio, I'll see you in a week. With laughter from the staff, we left for the villa. 15 minutes later, we stumbled into my bedroom, kissing. Then I realized, oh no, I don't have any rubbers. Do we need them? She asked. What about pregnancy? Are you on the pill? I asked, to which she burst into laughter. John, how old do you think I am? My childbearing days are long gone, she giggled. We had never discussed our ages, but she confessed, I'm 53. I was shocked. She looked much younger. Well, that's a relief, I laughed, pulling her in for another kiss. That week was magical. We made love, talked, swam, and laughed like teenagers. We spent most of our time undressed, except when Maria was around. By the end, I was nearly exhausted. Josie had to return to her cruise ship, and Archie was coming back soon, which would end our villa escapades anyway. As we lay on the bed after our final farewell, Josie whispered, Come with me, John. I thought I just did, I joked, earning a playful nudge. Seriously, she laughed. Come work on the ship. You could work at the bar and we'd be together every night. I'm not sure I can, I replied, feeling nervous. Her smile faded. Why not? Don't you love me? She snapped. Of course I do. It's the passport. It's fake. If anyone finds out, I could be arrested and sent back to prison for breaking my parole, I explained. You worry too much, she said with a laugh. If Archie is as good as you say, you'll be fine. Just think about it, okay? She kissed me before heading to the bathroom, swaying her hips as she left. The next 3 weeks dragged. Archie and I talked about my options. If I joined Josie, it was risky, but was it worth it? Archie reassured me, promising he could handle the paperwork. One night, after a few drinks, he asked, Would you risk 30 years of happiness or another 10 in jail? It wasn't much of a choice. I'd already lost 20 years. I wasn't about to waste more sneaking around for short visits with Josie. I decided to go for it, and even planned to propose. When I told Archie, he laughed, but promised to remember in case I backed out. Surprisingly, I didn't forget. The next day, I searched Palma for a ring, refusing Archie's offer to pay. I bought a modest one within my budget, hoping she'd like it. She did, showering me with kisses, tears of joy streaming down her face. Suddenly, Archie, Maria, Giorgio, and the bar staff burst into the lounge with champagne to celebrate. I later asked Archie, what if she'd said no? I'd have ordered double the champagne to drown our sorrows, he laughed. Over the next few months, we planned the wedding. We had little family, so a long engagement wasn't needed. Archie's lawyer in Palma handled the paperwork, creating documents making me a Guernsey citizen who had never been married. They passed scrutiny at the mayor's office. Josie managed the bridesmaids' dresses, while Archie and I handled our suits. On a sunny autumn day in late October, we married. Josie looked stunning in a cream silk dress that showed off her tan. She bounced around during the ceremony, spreading joy to everyone. The bridesmaids, dressed in crimson, dazzled with their dancers' bodies and long legs, captivating many guests. I had eyes only for my radiant bride. I couldn't believe my luck. The reception was at the bar, where Giorgio and Maria provided food and drinks, courtesy of my best man, Archie. Archie gave a hilarious speech and surprised us with a wedding gift, a 2-week safari in Kenya. Josie squealed with joy. I also met Felix, my soon-to-be boss on the ship. He was around my age, tall, with black hair flecked with gray. He was affectionate with Josie, but clearly harmlessly flamboyant. After the wedding, we checked into the island's poshest hotel, courtesy of Archie. In our suite, Josie undressed, and we made love, our first as husband and wife. It was different, filled with deep emotion. We fell asleep wrapped around each other, content and ready for our honeymoon. The following months were bliss. Our honeymoon in Kenya was incredible. Days on safari and nights making love. Back at the villa, Archie had vacated the master bedroom for us. Maria and Jose Alberto took care of the house and garden, while Josie enjoyed being a housewife, especially cooking. She and Maria made a great team in the kitchen. The bridesmaids visited whenever they could, though less often than in summer. Christmas came and went, celebrated with a party at the villa. My 50th birthday in February was celebrated similarly. By April, we packed up to start work on the ship, a fresh experience for me and a chance for Josie to sing for the public again. Our first cruise around Italy's coast was eye-opening. It was my first time outside England and Spain. We worked late evenings, giving us free afternoons to explore. Josie, having seen it all before, loved showing me around. Being at sea with someone you love adds a special romance. All too soon, our first cruise ended, and we returned to the villa. I excitedly shared my experiences with Archie, who patiently listened before suggesting we all celebrate by jumping into the pool. This routine continued for a few years. We'd be away for 3 to 4 weeks in summer and longer during winter cruises, which meant missing holidays like Christmas. One Christmas, Archie surprised us by joining our ship, saying he had nothing better to do. We had a wonderful time. Archie was a hit, mingling effortlessly with everyone. For a few years, this lifestyle was perfect. I worked up to managing the cocktail bar where Josie sang nightly. The Sky Lounge on the top deck offered panoramic ocean views. Josie loved performing there, and I couldn't be prouder when the audience cheered for her encore after every set. But on December 14th, 1998, everything changed. As we watched new passengers board, a black limousine pulled up. An older, balding man stepped out, followed by a woman who made my heart skip a beat. It was my ex-wife, looking just like her mother. My heart raced as I watched her confidently stride toward the ship. "John, what's wrong?" Josie asked, shaking my arm. "I'm feeling a bit nauseous," I lied. "I think I'll go lie down." "I'll come with you. You look awful." "No, you stay here," I insisted, nearly running to our cabin. What was I going to do? If she recognized me, I could lose everything. In the cabin, I grabbed the scotch and downed several swigs, letting the burn calm me. Maybe I could avoid her. She didn't know I was on the ship. Should I tell Josie? Definitely not. She'd confront my ex in an instant. This was my burden. For the next few days, I hid in the cabin as much as possible, leaving only at night for my shift. Every time the bar door opened, I tensed, fearing it was her. Josie noticed my change in behavior. I was quiet, irritable, and far from my usual self. She kept asking what was wrong, but I insisted it was just feeling unwell. Normally, I'd unwind at the gym after my shift. Jimmy, the leisure manager, had given me a key to use it whenever it was empty, usually around 3 a.m. But those first few days, I skipped the gym and went straight to the cabin to be with Josie. She wasn't used to me returning so early and questioned it, but I brushed off her concerns. We didn't even make love, which she noticed but didn't mention. After 4 days, I realized I couldn't hide forever. If Claire exposed me, I would deal with it. I had already served my time, and if I lost my job, it would just be another hit from my ex-wife. Josie knew most of my story. I trusted she would see through Claire's lies. I began to return to my normal routine, spending days with Josie exploring the islands, swimming and snorkeling. I spotted Claire occasionally, but managed to avoid direct contact. She was always glued to her partner, oblivious to everything else. Word among the staff was that they were rude, demanding, and never tipped. A couple of pretentious idiots, as one crew member put it. As the week went on, I started to relax. Claire and her husband hadn't come to the cocktail bar, and I hoped to get through the cruise without facing her. Then New Year's Eve came. The ship was alive with parties, gala dinners, shows, dancing. By midnight, things had quieted as passengers went to bed. Josie wasn't singing that night, so she had already retreated to our cabin after we shared a private New Year's kiss. After a busy night, I sent the bar staff back to their cabins and began to close up. Only a few stragglers remained. Around 2 a.m., I heard someone impatiently tapping on the bar. I turned, ready to set them straight. There she was, my ex-wife, staring at me with an air of superiority, No hint of recognition. Drunk, she slurred her words as she ordered a bottle of the best champagne. Shaken, I stammered, telling her I'd bring it over since the bar was waitress service only. She waved her suite key, instructing me to charge it to the room. No need to mention the charge. All purchases were automatically billed to passengers' cabins. I didn't correct her, wanting minimal interaction. I focused on preparing the champagne, placing it on ice with trembling hands. My emotions were a mix of anger and indignation. 10 years as a couple, and she had lied to ruin me. Had I changed so much that she didn't recognize me? A bit thinner, some gray hair, and no goatee, but I still looked the same. Yet, here she was, oblivious to the man whose life she had wrecked. I watched them from afar as they drank, laughing loudly while she kissed him and groped at his lap. It was embarrassing. A wealthy old man flaunting his trophy wife, behaving like randy teenagers. Normally, I'd suggest they take it to their cabin, but I kept my distance. Thankfully, the lounge was nearly empty, so their behavior didn't matter. They finally left after about half an hour. She dragged her drunk husband to his feet, grabbed the champagne, and staggered out. I sighed in relief, my heart slowing. Maybe she hadn't recognized me. With a few days left on the cruise, I hoped this nightmare would pass. I was wrong. The next day, for the first time since she boarded, I felt like myself again. I made love to Josie multiple times, enjoying our day together in the cabin. By the time we started our shift, I was worn out and starving. That night, they returned. Sober, at first. They watched Josie's set, clapping politely with the crowd. I felt more relaxed, thinking if I kept my distance, she wouldn't notice me. They ordered 2 more bottles of wine, getting drunk before leaving, singing off key as they staggered out. For now, they were out of my life again. After they left, I cleared their table. Picking up a crumpled napkin, I noticed writing on it. My heart sank when I read, "I know who you are." Panic washed over me. I felt faint and sat down. My life with Josie was about to be ruined, and I knew Claire would enjoy destroying me again. Tears filled my eyes. I heard someone approach. "John, you look awful. Are you okay?" I barely registered who it was. "No, I'll be fine. Just need to sit for a bit," I muttered, stumbling back to the storeroom, clutching the note. My mind raced for a way out. I knew the phone would ring soon. When it did, I almost jumped out of my skin. "Hello, Sky Lounge," I answered. "Hello, John. Long time no see." Her voice chilled me. "What do you want, Claire? Can't you just leave me alone?" Chuckling, she replied, "Oh, I don't think so. I need you to do something for me." "What the hell do you want?" Now, John, no need for hostility. Come to my cabin in an hour and you'll find out." "Go to hell, Claire. We're finished." "You'll come if you don't want everyone on this ship to know about the convicted butcher among them." "You vindictive witch. Haven't you done enough?" "We both know the truth, John, but the others don't. See you in an hour." I slammed the phone down, rage boiling inside. I knew she would carry out her threat. I had no choice. An hour later, I stood outside the presidential suite, secluded with a private balcony. Josie and I had used this suite for secret rendezvous when it was vacant. Now it was an ominous place. After a moment's hesitation, I knocked, and the door swung open slightly. Claire called out, inviting me in. The sitting room was empty, but through the open bedroom doors, I saw her husband sprawled on the bed, pants around his ankles, snoring. "Out here, John," Claire called from the balcony. She sat in a lounger, wearing a black silk robe that left little to the imagination. "What do you want, Claire?" I demanded. "Sit down," she replied, laughing and pushing a chair toward me with her foot, flashing her thigh provocatively. "No, we have nothing to talk about. What do you want?" I snapped. She dropped the robe, standing undressed in the doorway, grinning like a carnivore. "Right now, I want some good sex. You were always good in bed, John. We'll discuss the rest later." My heart sank. I didn't want to be near her. I hated her. The only person I wanted was several decks below, probably asleep by now. I glanced nervously at her husband, still sprawled in the bedroom, clueless. "Oh, don't worry about him, John. He won't wake up until at least noon. And if he did, he'd probably enjoy watching a real man with me," she sneered. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Maybe if I went along with it, she'd leave me alone. Maybe I could avoid further trouble. But then I thought of Josie. I couldn't betray her. Claire climbed onto my lap, grabbing my head and forcing a kiss. She ripped open my shirt. I sat there, fists clenched, anger boiling inside. She had no right. She had rejected me years ago, and now she wanted me again. Well, if sex was what she wanted, she would get it. But not how she expected. I stood, throwing her off me onto the floor. Grabbing her arms, I yanked her up and shoved her against the balcony rail. I was determined she wouldn't enjoy this. For a couple of minutes, I did what she wanted, but it was clear she loved every second. That's when I knew what I had to do. I had to get her out of my life for good. I grabbed her hair, lifted her over the railing. Her scream vanished into the night as she fell into the dark sea below. Silence filled the air, except for the sound of the water far below. I felt strangely calm. No remorse, no regrets. It's true. Taking a life gets easier each time. She had threatened my marriage and had to go. She had stolen 20 years of my life and now wanted to destroy my happiness. No more. Enough was enough. I glanced into the bedroom. Her husband was still passed out. He was lucky. If he'd woken, he'd have gone over too. I buttoned my shirt, fixed my hair, and checked for any trace of myself. A couple of buttons were on the floor, so I kicked them over the side. I poured out the champagne and wiped the glass clean. Then I quietly left the suite and returned to my cabin, slipping into bed beside Josie. I didn't sleep, just listened to her breathing, my mind racing. The next afternoon, chaos erupted. Rumors circulated that a passenger had fallen overboard. Her husband woke up to find her missing, but searches turned up nothing. The captain decided not to turn back. In the middle of the Atlantic, finding her was nearly impossible. The staff, including myself, gave statements about the couple's condition when they left the bar. Her husband was distraught, blaming himself for being too drunk to protect his wonderful wife. Speculation spread. Some thought he pushed her, others believed she jumped. Theories ran wild among the nearly 4,000 people on board, none of them even close to the truth, except for me. I knew exactly what happened but kept silent. The ship grew quiet and somber for the remainder of the journey. Entertainment was canceled out of respect, so Josie joined me in the bar during the evenings. We docked 2 days later in Palma. The Spanish police took our statements but agreed with the captain's conclusion: a tragic accident. Everything had gone as planned. And that's the end of my story. Do I feel guilty? Not really. I spent 20 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit. This felt like balancing the scales. 15 years later, I occasionally feel a hint of remorse, but not much. If I hadn't been sent to prison, I wouldn't have met Archie, moved to Majorca, or found Josie. In a twisted way, I have Claire to thank for my life now. But those regrets quickly fade. When I think of Claire, I remember an eye for an eye, a life for a life. She stole a part of my life, so I took hers. She turned me into this, a cold-hearted eliminator. So screw her.